in this life, it's amazing what talking to yourself in that narrative and just saying, well, I'm doing it for the job. I'm doing it for the job. And then it's like, shit, man, where that guy that, and with what you do, it's like, it really is. It's like, you got to be the fucking role. You got to be the fucking role. But then,
well, we're type A personalities, right? So we're going to go in headstrong, right, and dive right in. But there's always a price to pay.
Yeah.
There's always a price to pay.
Yeah.
And I always say, it's funny you say about the excuse. It'd be so easy for me to say, like when I wrote the book, that, all my actions and what happened to me was a result of, working undercover for all those years. But man, you got to look in the mirror, man. You make your own decisions and you live with them. And so I look in the mirror and I say, whose fault it is? That guy right there. That guy made the bad decisions.
And both things can be true. It's like, look at what you fucking did. 1,000 guns off the, it's like, look at the career, look at the relationships, look at the, on the front lines of this thing,
Yeah.
And again, man, like, just God bless that you can look at it now and look at this sort of like crisis that came in and realize that it was probably the opportunity of your life, and it saved you, saved your family.
That psychiatrist told me, she said, with all the betrayal, over these past 2 decades that you've experienced, she said, if there wasn't something wrong with you, I'd be worried.
Fucking A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I never use any of that as an excuse, man. I made my own decisions.
Sure.
And, but you can certainly see, like you're saying, why you went down a certain path based on what was going on. Would all that shit have happened if I had stayed at the bank? Probably not, man.
Yeah. Right. Right. And so what now, man? Like, what are your goals now? Like, what do you want now? What gets you up in the morning? What makes you happy? What are you looking forward to?
So the book has brought me so many great opportunities. It's gotten me on the speaking circuit. And I got to thank Steve Murphy and Javier Pena, the DEA Narcos guys, the 2 awesome legends who brought down Pablo Escobar, because they kind of been my godfathers in this speaking business and gotten me in. And I'm able to go around at these law enforcement conferences and I tell my story. And I love doing it. And I love looking out at these faces, at these cops, because I can see the stress on their faces, right? I see it in their eyes. And I tell them that the most important thing, right, because what we do as law enforcement, as cops, we always put the job first. The job's before our health. It's before our families. We always put it first. I say, just do this for me. The most important thing in your career is your pension. That's the most important thing, right? We're lucky because we're one of the last professions that still have a pension, right? And you have to live a long, healthy life after you retire because you've earned that pension. Now make the government pay you that, right? So your goal, and I always tell them this, is to get paid longer than you worked, right? I worked for 26 years. My goal is to get that pension for 27 years.
I love it.
So take care of yourself, man. I know what you're doing is so important right now, and that case you're on right now is so important. Step back. It's not that important. Look who's around you when you go home. That's what's important. Those people you take for granted, right? The family, friends that you're taking for granted, that's what's most important. Look at who's around you. Tell them you love them. Give them a kiss. And think about your pension.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. You mentioned when you first walked in about Mel. And, Mel's obviously an important person in both of our lives. But just tell a little bit about Mel Chancey and how he came into your life.
So Mel Chancey, and it's kind of funny because, I started to tell you that there was that old cartoon I used to watch when I was a kid with a sheepdog and a wolf. And they were like mortal enemies, right? And all day they're battling back and forth because the wolf's trying to get the sheepdog's protecting the sheep. And then at the end of the day, they would clock out with their time cards and exchange pleasantries and walk away with their lunch boxes, right? Because they were okay. And that's kind of like, ATF agents and outlaw bikers are mortal enemies, right? I mean, they hate us, we hate them, right? Our goal is to lock them up in prison for the rest of their life, right? And so it's kind of ironic and funny that Mel Chancey, who was an outlaw biker, has become such a huge part of my life. You know, Mel has held my kids, and my wife loves him, and he's a
how can you not, right?
part of my family, right?
Yeah,
How can you not? So he was brought into my life by one of my best friends and my mentor, Chris Bayless, and Chris, ironically, went undercover with the ultimate goal of locking Mel up.
Yeah.
Chris went undercover in a different chapter because he didn't want to be in Mel's chapter because they had grown up in a very kind of close to each other. So he was worried about a little cross-contamination there possibly. And ultimately, Mel faced RICO charges. So in a weird kind of twist, Chrisser and Mel became friends. Now, Mel went to prison, and Chrisser ended up looking after Mel's mom, who's one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met in my life, while Mel was in prison, and staying in touch with him. And, when Mel got out, there was a friendship there. And so when Mel got out, Chrisser told me, I want you to meet this guy. And all I knew was Chrisser vouched for him. That's all I needed to know, right? Because that's good enough for me. And so he took me over to his house, met his old Italian mom. The whole scene was just kind of funny. And this was huge, Mel. I mean, he was the thickest man I've ever met.
And you knew his reputation.
Oh, yeah. Everyone.
What was Mel's reputation? I mean, Mel was...
So Mel was the scariest outlaw biker who had ever roamed the face of the earth. Mel Chancey was feared. Mel lived a brutal existence, violence, and he was the real deal. And everyone knew of him and knew he was not to be taken lightly, not to be messed with. This Mel we know now is not, I call him good Mel. Bad Mel was a whole different person. And so, I of course knew of him, and Christer had filled me in on everything. And when I met this guy, this was not what I expected. Right? This was this engaging neighborhood guy.
But do you think that, man, because again, you've experienced, it's like you've been around, it's a big thing we always talk about on this show. It's like, unless you've been in the valley, you really can't know the fucking mountaintops, right?
For sure.
And it's like, you sure as fuck can't help people. Like, you can't, unless you've been down there, like, you really can't reach down and pull others out. And it's just like, it keeps on happening. It's like guys like you, guys like Mel. It's like guys, he's really been there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now it's like devoting his life to helping others and spreading joy. You know what I mean?
And one thing that's easy to forget about Mel, because his outlook is so good on life. Mel did a lot of time in prison. Between state and federal prison, Mel's done a lot of time in prison.
And hard time.
Hard time. Yeah, because Mel was in it. They weren't putting Mel Chancey in a minimum security. Right. Mel was at the maxes. And with the worst of the worst. And I don't know about you, but I can't imagine spending one night in jail. Right? And this dude has spent, imagine, years and years and years in prison. Like how he could have such a positive outlook on life is one of the most amazing things about him to me. So I was introduced to him, and he was like every guy I grew up with, man. He was a neighborhood guy, right? I could have been Mel Chancey, right? You could have been Mel Chancey, right? He's another guy who got caught up in it. He got caught up in it. And he was very good at it. And he rose to the highest levels of his profession.
That's right.
And we just developed the same bond that he and Chrisser had. I developed with him.
It's beautiful.
And the funny thing was, he knew of the crew that I was working when I was in Chicago. He had dealt with those guys, and he knew of those guys, and we just bonded right away. He came to my house. Like I said, he's held my kids. I've been to his house, and I saw in Mel, like not just the incredible story of redemption, but I saw this light in this guy. I was like, man, if this guy who spent like easily a quarter of his life behind bars in prison, and the rest of it, in this incredibly violent world, if he can see the sunshine through the clouds, so can I.
Fucking
man.
A. It's inspiring.
Actually, he has been a huge inspiration to me, man. A convicted felon, head of a motorcycle gang, outlaw biker. And he's been one of the biggest inspirations in the latter part of my life, man.
Oh, that's beautiful, man.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, I love him, man.
That's beautiful.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's John, Bam Bam the dog. First, on behalf of both of us and everybody from the Real Ones team, I just want to sincerely thank you guys for tuning in. The folks that I bring on the show, they're family to me, and being able to tell their stories and bringing you into their world is something I'm just super proud of, and again, grateful that you guys tune in. We've decided we want to take things just a step further. It's a Patreon community. And basically what that means is if you become a part of this community, look, I already bored Bam Bam. If you want to become a part of this community, you're going to be able to hear episodes early and all that, ad-free and all that good stuff. But there's all this behind-the-scenes footage, all this stuff that we've shot that really brings you into the folks that we've had on the show, really brings you into their world. Live chats with me and the folks that I bring on the show to talk about their world, talk about the issues that they're dealing with, about their triumphs and their tragedies. Just go to Patreon/RealOnes on this website that you see right there, right on the screen, that's right in front of you. This whole idea was something about building bridges and bringing people together and bringing folks that often don't get the mic and giving the mic to them. So the fact that you guys tune in means the world. Anyways, again, thank you. Be good to each other out there. Rock and roll.